This year, I am the co-chair of Generation Action. Generation Action is a student organization that promotes reproductive freedom and sexual education across MTSU. It's actually an organization affiliated with Planned Parenthood, and there are chapters across the United States. We table bi-weekly, usually outside the KUC, and we give out condoms and sex ed pamphlets. We haven't had many difficult situations. People always come up to us and they're like, "Oh, has anybody given you any trouble?" And the answer is usually, well, no, usually people are really supportive. But we've been in a couple weird situations. One time I was tabling with a friend and this guy came up to her and said, "I'm glad you weren't aborted," and just kind of left. And then another time I was tabling and this guy came up and he asked the girl next to me, "How many abortions have you done?" And she was like, "Well, I haven't performed any abortions because I'm not a doctor." That's definitely the exception. Most people are usually like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're out here. You're so brave for being at a conservative college with a Planned Parenthood tablecloth." And we're like, it's really not a big deal, guys. There's absolutely a stigma around reproductive education, especially in the South, especially in the rural South. And a lot of kids come to college not having received any sexual education from their high schools.
Why do you think that is?
It's hard to pinpoint one reason, but I think a lot of it is that there's lingering fear around sexuality, especially adolescent sexuality, and there's kind of a culture of not talking about sex. Action chapter at MTSU is relatively new. We've only been around for a year, so you might not have heard of us yet, but we're aiming to become a presence on campus and to work with other progressive student organizations. We really want to eventually, we have a lot of long-term goals that involve making contraceptive more accessible across campus and alleviating some of the stigma around abortion in our area. A lot of sexual education only focuses on preventing pregnancy or just general risk prevention, and especially it focuses on heterosexual sex, and it kind of ignores same-sex sexual relationships or transgender people, and doesn't address like pleasure, which is an important component of sex. And a lot of girls don't understand their own bodies because they didn't receive an adequate education. Well, I can think specifically with regard to Planned Parenthood that most of the services that Planned Parenthood provides are abortion services, which is absolutely not the case. 90% of the services that Planned Parenthood provides are things like STI testing or Pap smears, things that anybody could get. Actually, Generation Action, they actually organized the protest on campus back in February. My friend Lauren Schuler was in charge of that, and honestly, the College Democrats took credit for it, but they just kind of jumped on board last minute. Yeah, Students Active for Feminism and Equality, or SAFE, is another group that I participate in. And they coordinate with Generation Action sometimes. Generation Action is more advocacy oriented and more politically driven usually, and SAFE is more about a space to build community. Like, for instance, SAFE does things like they create zines, which are self-published magazines, and they host the Gender Blender, which is a fundraiser for menstrual products for homeless shelters. They also host a production of Vagina Monologues. This weekend is Nashville Pride Fest, and I am going to be tabling with Planned Parenthood. We'll be giving out all sorts of condoms, and we'll be, promoting the clinic services now.